Welcome back to Whyloric, the podcast for curious minds. I'm your host, and every episode, we explore something worth thinking about. Career, life, culture, history, or just the little whys we never stop asking.
We've all experienced that brutal 12-hour workday that just yields absolutely zero tangible progress, right? The absolute worst.
It's like you log in at 8 in the morning, you answer, 200 emails, you sit through 6 consecutive cross-functional syncs.
Back to back?
Right, back to back. You put out 3 localized fires, and then when you finally close your laptop late in the evening, you realize you haven't moved a single core objective forward.
Yeah.
Your heart rate was up, your stress levels were elevated, but your actual output was just completely stagnant. And that brings us to the core realization of our deep dive today, which is busy and effective are not the same word.
They are definitely not the same word.
No, they aren't.
Yeah.
And today we're unpacking a really fascinating script from a show called Whyloric. It isolates this very specific, very uncomfortable reality about how we work.
It's a great piece. It really dissects the cognitive shift that separates people who actually scale their impact and, accelerate their careers from those who are just perpetually spinning their wheels, just stuck in the mud of administrative overhead.
Exactly. And, whether you're sitting at your desk on day one of your professional life, just trying to figure out how to navigate this overwhelming new environment, or you're a decade deep into your career and hitting this persistent plateau.
Right, like a mid-career slump.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
The bottleneck usually isn't a lack of effort. People are working hard. The bottleneck is how you're structurally relating to the concept of work itself.
Yeah, the Whyloric script frames this problem so well. It's not about how hard you push, it's about that relationship. And it argues that the primary dysfunction in the modern workplace is that we use exhaustion as a proxy for value.
Right. Which, if you step back and look at the architecture of knowledge work, it becomes pretty clear why this happens,
Because of how we historically view labor.
Yeah, exactly. In physical labor or manufacturing, effort and output are visibly, inextricably linked. If you swing a hammer for 10 hours, you drive a mathematically predictable number of nails.
The feedback loop is immediate. It's binary.
Totally binary. But in a complex, ambiguous corporate environment, or really any strategic or creative role, that linear relationship just evaporates.
It's gone.
Completely gone. You can spend 10 hours formatting a slide deck that literally no one reads. Or, on the flip side, you can spend 30 minutes identifying a critical flaw in a product launch that saves the company millions of dollars.
Yeah, the effort required is almost inverse to the impact generated sometimes.
It is. Yet because we lack clean, objective metrics for strategy or innovation on a random Tuesday afternoon, we fall back on this primitive metric of fatigue. We measure the sweat, not the distance traveled.
Which perfectly sets up the distinction the source text makes between maintaining a transactional relationship with your work versus a systems approach.
Yes, the transactional mindset.
Right, and the transactional mindset is essentially the psychological contract we draft with our environment. It's like, I put in the labor, now produce my result. It assumes the universe or the market or your boss is functioning like a vending machine.
That's a great way to put it. The vending machine logic.
Yeah. I insert 40 hours of stress and out pops a promotion or a successful project. And when that vending machine inevitably eats our coin and gives us nothing, the transactional thinker just assumes they need to shake the machine harder.
Just work 50 hours, then 60.
Exactly. They never stop to examine whether the machine is even plugged in.
And you have to realize the socialization of that transactional mindset begins way before we enter the workforce. The entire educational apparatus is designed around a strictly linear reward system.
Right, like you do the homework, you get the grade.
Exactly. You complete the standardized worksheet, you receive the gold star. You memorize the flashcards for 3 hours, you earn a B. You memorize them for 5 hours, you earn an A.
The parameters are fixed.
They're fixed, the rules are transparent, and effort is rewarded with near perfect reliability. And this conditions a Pavlovian response where we equate grinding with success.
But the moment you transition into a real-world professional landscape,
the parameters are completely unmoored. And the systems thinker recognizes this fundamental environmental shift. They abandon the vending machine logic. Instead of asking, did I work hard enough today to justify my salary? They ask a structural question.
Which is the specific action I'm taking right now mathematically capable of moving the right objective forward?
Yes. They shift their measurement from the volume of their effort to the precision of their direction.
I love that. And if we look at the mechanics of this, I mean, working transactionally is essentially like running on a treadmill.
Oh, the treadmill analogy is perfect for this.
Right. You're exerting massive physical and mental energy. You're sweating, you're panting, you're burning calories. By all biological metrics, you are working incredibly hard.
Exhausted.
But if your actual goal is to travel to the grocery store to get food, the treadmill is functionally useless. Your effort was high, but your direction was non-existent.
And this brings us to hustle culture, which the text critiques quite heavily.
Oh, absolutely.
Hustle culture is essentially a societal cult dedicated to the treadmill.
Wow. Yeah.
It glorifies the state of being out of breath. It incentivizes the performance of labor over the actual utility of the labor. And the most dangerous part of hustle culture is that it provides a very convincing illusion of progress.
Because you feel drained.
Right. Because you feel drained at the end of the week. Your brain chemically rewards you with a sense of accomplishment. It completely masks the fact that you haven't advanced your strategic position at all.
I actually felt personally victimized by this part of the source text.
I think we all did, honestly.
Yeah, that realization that being busy doesn't mean being effective, it hurts a bit. But why does that illusion persist? Why do we cling to it?
Well, the treadmill illusion persists because it serves as a powerful ego defense mechanism.
Ah, right.
I mean, confronting the reality that you spent an entire week executing tasks that just didn't matter, that requires a level of professional vulnerability most people are not prepared for, it forces you to admit that your judgment was flawed.
And the transactional mindset protects you from that.
Completely. If a project fails, but you slept under your desk and worked 80-hour weeks, you can shield yourself from criticism by pointing to your sacrifice. You can just say, I gave it everything I had. And society generally accepts that as a valid defense.
But the systems thinker strips away that armor.
Exactly. They separate their self-worth from their sweat output. They view a failed outcome not as a lack of moral effort, but as a flaw in the system's design that requires recalibration.
That detached analytical view of your own labor, that is the prerequisite for escaping the hustle trap.
It is, but escaping that trap requires a complete rewiring of how we prioritize our daily actions.
Which brings us directly to the 80-20 principle, the concept that a vast majority of our results, like 80%, stem from a tiny minority of our efforts, the 20%.
Right. And in a modern corporate environment, pretty much any knowledgeable professional already understands the mathematical concept of Pareto distribution.
And we've all heard that.
We all know the math. But the actual challenge isn't understanding it, it's the psychological warfare of implementing it.
Right, because identifying the 20% that constitutes high leverage requires looking at this sprawling, chaotic environment and realizing something uncomfortable.
Which is that most of the organizational tasks you're assigned exist purely to sustain the bureaucracy of the organization, not to actually advance its goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the typical worker operates additively. They view their value through the accumulation of responsibilities. They adopt this defensive posture where dropping any task feels like a dereliction of duty. I just need to add 15 tasks to my to-do list and do them all.
While the successful individual operates subtractively, they understand that cognitive bandwidth is a zero-sum game.
Totally zero-sum.
Every ounce of mental energy you spend deliberating over the font choice in an internal memo or participating in a status meeting where you have literally no speaking role.
Oh, the worst.
Right. That is energy siphoned directly away from the deep, complex problem solving that actually dictates your career trajectory.
So training the mind for leverage means ruthlessly shifting your internal interrogative.
Yes. When you sit down in the morning, the default human instinct is to look at a list of 30 tasks and ask, how can I sequence these to get through them all as fast as possible?
Just plow through them.
Exactly. But the high leverage thinker looks at the same list and asks, if I could only complete one of these tasks today before the internet shuts down, which one actually alters the fundamental state of my project?
They're hunting for the fulcrum.
Yes, looking for the lever that moves the heaviest object with the least amount of force.
But, okay, let me push back on this for a second, because let's look at the actual political reality of execution here.
Sure.
If I identify the one massive high-leverage task that represents my 20%, what happens to the other 80%? I mean, if I just decide to ignore administrative requests, endless low-priority emails from other departments, bureaucratic box checking, won't the system punish me?
A very valid fear.
Right. The fear of dropping the 80% isn't just irrational anxiety. It's a fear of being perceived as uncooperative or, worse, incompetent. The source material advises to just focus on the 20%, and you'll be surprised how much of your list you can just delete. But what is the actual mechanism of that deletion? How do you navigate the consequences of letting things fall through the cracks?
That's the million-dollar question. Navigating that deletion requires understanding the difference between active and passive task mortality.
Active and passive mortality. Okay, break that down.
So when you deliberately quarantine the 80% of low-leverage tasks, you aren't necessarily declaring war on your colleagues or refusing to do your job. You are applying friction to non-essential requests.
Friction.
Right. A significant portion of that 80% consists of manufactured urgency. Let's say someone slacks you asking for a piece of data they could easily find themselves. Or a manager asks for a bespoke report because they haven't really clarified their own thinking yet.
Happens all the time.
All the time. If you instantly respond and accommodate every single low-leverage request, you train your environment to view your time as an infinite low-cost resource.
Oh, wow.
But if you deliberately delay engagement with those tasks to protect your high-leverage work, a fascinating phenomenon occurs. The tasks often resolve themselves.
Wait, really? They just go away?
Often, yes. The colleague finds the data on their own. The manager realizes they didn't actually need the report. Or the deadline passes and absolutely nothing catastrophic happens, proving the task was never tied to a critical outcome in the first place.
So you're letting the fire burn out from a lack of oxygen rather than exhausting yourself trying to extinguish every single spark?
Exactly. But the resistance to doing that is heavily tied to our neurochemistry.
Yeah, because we want that quick win.
Right. We cling to the 80% because low-leverage tasks are usually incredibly clearly defined, and they provide a rapid dopamine hit. Replying to a straightforward email from Steve provides immediate closure. You cross it off the list, you feel a surge of synthetic productivity, and your brain is happy.
Synthetic productivity. That's so accurate. Because tackling the massive, ambiguous, strategic planning document, the true 20%, is terrifying.
It's awful. Progress is invisible, the cognitive load is immense, and there is zero immediate closure.
So we hide in the 80% as a form of productive procrastination.
Yes. We tell ourselves we are working hard, completely ignoring the fact that we are systematically avoiding the only work that actually matters. Letting go of the low-leverage tasks requires building a tolerance for the anxiety of an uncleared inbox.
Yeah, it requires an intentional desensitization to the feeling of being behind on trivial matters so you can be ahead on structural matter.
Exactly.
And this pursuit of high leverage leads directly into what I think is the most counterintuitive psychological framework from the text.
The mechanics of testing and failure.
Yes, because when people think of highly successful, high-leverage individuals, the assumption is that these people have this preternatural ability to make the right decision on the first try. We assume success is a product of high accuracy.
But the reality, as outlined in the script, is that successful people actually fail significantly more often than stagnant people.
More often, not less.
Way more often. The differentiator is the velocity and the cost of their failures. They have mastered the art of failing fast and cheaply.
Let's ground this in a highly specific modern corporate scenario to examine exactly how this works. Let's say you are a junior professional, maybe an analyst or a marketing coordinator, and you're trying to establish a reputation in a new role.
Okay, setting the scene.
Your department head asks you to develop a proposal for a new internal workflow system to solve some communication bottleneck.
Right.
The standard defensive instinct driven by the intense desire to prove your competence is to isolate yourself. You retreat into a silo.
Well, I've seen this 100 times.
Right. You spend 3 weeks exhaustively researching software options. You build a complex financial model for implementation costs. You design a flawless 40-slide presentation with transition animations.
The transition animations are crucial.
Obviously. You pour 120 hours of raw effort into this artifact, and you finally unveil it in a meeting, and the department head looks at slide 2 and says, "Oh, IT already told us we can't buy external software for this due to security protocols. We need a solution using our existing tools."
Ouch. And that right there is the anatomy of a catastrophic, expensive failure.
It's brutal.
It's expensive in multiple dimensions, too. I mean, it costs the company 120 hours of payroll. It cost you 3 weeks of your life. But most importantly, it cost you political capital and momentum. You are now associated with a severe misallocation of resources.
All because of the instinct to be perfect.
Exactly. You wanted the reveal to be unassailable. But the fast, cheap failure alternative relies on an entirely different workflow.
What does that look like?
Well, in the cheap failure model, after receiving the assignment, you spend maybe 45 minutes drafting a bulleted list in a plain text email. It outlines the 3 core assumptions of your approach. I plan to look at external software vendors, estimate a budget of X, and target a rollout by Q3.
Okay, very simple.
Very simple. You send that to the department head or just grab them for a 2-minute conversation in the hallway. They look at it and immediately say, no, IT won't allow external vendors.
So you just failed. Your initial hypothesis was completely incorrect.
Yes. But the cost of that failure was 45 minutes, not 3 weeks.
Wow.
That is the definition of cheap data acquisition. You extracted the exact same vital constraint, the IT security protocol, but you paid pennies for it instead of your life savings.
And you neutralized the emotional sting of being wrong because you hadn't tied your ego to a 40-slide debt.
Exactly. You treated your initial idea not as a precious monument to your intelligence, but as a disposable probe sent out to gather telemetry from the environment.
Letting reality test the idea before you invest your resources in building the infrastructure.
And that's the paradox of perfectionism. It practically guarantees catastrophic failure in complex environments.
Because the perfectionist is terrified of being wrong, so they avoid engaging with reality until they feel their work is bulletproof.
Right. But reality is where all the actual variables live.
Yeah.
The longer you wait to expose your idea to the environment, the larger the delta grows between your assumptions and the truth.
So when you finally launch the project, you aren't just testing one hypothesis.
No, you're testing 1,000 compounded assumptions all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And if any one of them is wrong, the entire structure collapses. By refusing to tolerate micro failures early in the process, the perfectionist engineers a macro failure at the end of the process.
That is such a critical piece of mentorship for anyone navigating the early stages of their career. We're taught to view a failure as a demerit on a permanent record, like a glaring indicator that we are an imposter who slipped through the hiring process.
And you have to actively override that conditioning. A small failure is not an indictment of your character. Mm-hmm. It's a sensor pinging back data. If you launch a small, localized pilot program for a new initiative and it completely falls apart, that isn't a disaster. That is a highly successful extraction of information. You now possess a detailed map of exactly where the minefield is, and you acquired it without blowing up the entire department.
But executing this kind of rapid, cheap testing is impossible if you don't undergo a fundamental psychological shift in how you frame your daily activities, right?
Totally impossible. The tactical application of failing fast relies entirely on moving away from what the text calls the performance mindset and adopting an experimentation mindset.
Okay, unpack the performance mindset for us.
When you view your work as a performance, you're operating under the assumption that your baseline competence is constantly on trial. Every deliverable, every speaking opportunity in a meeting, every email sent to a superior is a stage.
And on a stage, you can't mess up.
Exactly. In a performance, perfection on the first try is the only acceptable metric. This generates a crippling ambient anxiety that paralyzes decision-making.
Yeah, let's look at how this manifests in a modern office. Treating your work as a performance is like treating every single project like a finalized, consumer-facing product launch. If Apple is launching a new iPhone on a global stage, they cannot afford a hardware glitch. The stakes are existential.
Right.
But if you treat drafting a quarterly strategy memo with that same level of existential dread, you will freeze. You will agonize over every sentence. You'll delay sending it, and you'll aggressively filter out any innovative or unconventional ideas because they carry the risk of being poorly received.
The performance mindset makes you risk-averse, sterile, and slow. You become so obsessed with defending your reputation that you stop actually doing the work.
The alternative being the experimentation mindset.
Yes. This is where you fundamentally redefine the purpose of your output. You are no longer on a stage. You're in a laboratory.
I love the actor versus scientist analogy here.
It works so well. Because when a scientist mixes 2 compounds and they unexpectedly combust and shatter the beaker, the scientist doesn't collapse in a puddle of tears and declare themselves a fraud.
Right. They don't think, I'm a terrible person because this beaker exploded.
Exactly. The explosion is not a reflection of their moral worth. The explosion is a data point. They literally write down compound A and compound B result in violent combustion under these specific thermal conditions.
The failure of the materials is a success of the scientific method.
Yes. And when you apply this to your career, you stop seeing your work as a final judgment on your abilities and start seeing it as an iterative process of finding out what breaks.
That shift is where the psychological relief comes in. The text points out that it takes an enormous amount of pressure off your daily existence.
It really does.
Yeah.
Weirdly so.
Yeah. When you frame an undertaking as an experiment, you are giving yourself permission to not have the answer. You transition from a defensive posture of, I have to prove I'm right, to an exploratory posture of, I get to figure out how this works.
Less, I have to be right, more, I get to figure this out.
Exactly. So if you pitch a new marketing channel to your team and phrase it as, this is the absolute best strategy and it will definitely increase revenue by 20%, you have just set yourself up for a high stakes performance.
And if it underperforms, you lose credibility.
But if you pitch it as, I have a hypothesis that this channel might yield a lower customer acquisition cost, I've designed a 2-week $500 test to see if the data supports this, you have completely removed the risk.
Because if the test fails, you didn't fail. The hypothesis was just disproven.
You still look incredibly competent because you executed the experiment perfectly.
And this framing fundamentally alters your throughput. The professional who views work as an experiment will comfortably launch 10 small tests in the time it takes the perfectionist to launch one massive project.
10 to 1, that's huge.
It's massive. And even if 8 of those 10 tests fail completely, the experimenter has discovered 2 high-leverage pathways that are verified by reality. They will consistently outpace the perfectionist because their velocity of learning is exponentially higher.
So career progression is not about preventing mistakes. It's about metabolizing mistakes faster than anyone else.
Beautifully said. That is exactly it.
So we've traversed a significant amount of theoretical ground here. We've deconstructed the transactional hustle trap, we've explored the necessity of the 80-20 rule, the mechanics of cheap data acquisition, and the psychological relief of the experimental mindset.
We covered a lot.
But if I'm listening to this on my commute right now, or I'm sitting down at my desk with a cup of coffee, how do I synthesize this into a functional operating system? Like, what does the actual granular daily toolkit look like for systematically applying these principles?
The source material gives us a very clear, structured 3-step cognitive protocol.
Yep.
And you need to run this every single morning before you allow the chaos of the environment to dictate your actions.
Okay, step 1.
Step 1 is the leverage check. Before you open your inbox, before you check your calendar, before you respond to a single notification, you force yourself to answer one question.
What is the absolute highest leverage thing I could execute today?
Exactly. You are actively hunting for the 20%. You are looking for the one task that, if completed, fundamentally advances your core strategic objectives, even if it is the most difficult, ambiguous, or intimidating task on your plate.
You identify the fulcrum.
You find the fulcrum.
Okay, so I've identified the massive, intimidating, high-leverage task. Step 2 is where we deploy the laboratory mindset, right? The experiment check.
Yes, step 2 is the experiment check. Instead of vanishing into a cave for 3 weeks to build a perfect solution, you ask, what is the cheapest, fastest way I can expose this idea to reality?
Deconstruct the task.
Right. You deconstruct the high-leverage task into its smallest testable component. How do I build the 30-minute text outline instead of the 40-slide presentation? How do I get a localized yes or no from my manager or the market before I commit heavy cognitive or financial resources?
You're designing a low-cost probe to verify your direction.
Precisely. And then, once you have established your high-leverage target and designed your cheap test, you must ruthlessly manage the remaining noise, which is step 3.
The 80-20 audit.
The 80-20 audit. You look at the rest of your to-do list, the administrative debris, the routine sinks, the low-impact requests. You identify the vast majority of these tasks that do not move the needle, and you actively apply friction to them.
Let the fires burn out.
Yes. You delete what you can, you delay what you cannot delete, and you intentionally operate with strategic incompetence on the tasks that don't matter, preserving your cognitive bandwidth for the experiment you just designed. You manage the fallout of the 80% so you can execute the 20%.
The beauty of this 3-step daily system is that it physically prevents you from falling into a 2-year career stalling disaster.
It literally makes it impossible.
Because you cannot spend months building the wrong thing perfectly if you're systematically forcing yourself to test your assumptions every single week. It keeps you moving forward, navigating by the constant feedback of cheap data, rather than exhausting yourself running blind on the treadmill of hustle culture.
It's the secret to moving faster in your career, systematically.
We started this discussion trapped in the exhaustion of the transactional mindset, that pervasive feeling of trading massive amounts of sweat for the mere illusion of progress, crippled by the fear that one mistake will ruin your trajectory.
Such an exhausting place to be.
It is. But by shifting our framework, we've moved to a place of clear, calculated leverage. We've redefined our daily labor not as a high-wire performance where a single misstep is fatal, but as a resilient system of rapid, cheap experiments.
And executing this shift won't just optimize your output metrics on paper. It will fundamentally alter your psychological relationship with your career.
It removes the paralyzing anxiety of perfectionism. It gives you permission to be wrong as long as you're wrong quickly and cheaply.
It gives you your time back.
Yeah.
It allows you to systematically ignore the noise that masquerades as work.
It takes the pressure off, and it gives you the freedom to simply figure things out. So, to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final concrete challenge to apply this immediately. Think about the largest, most critical project taking up your mental bandwidth right now, the one you are pouring your resources into. If you haven't explicitly designed a mechanism to fail at a piece of that project quickly and cheaply in the next 2 weeks, are you actually just setting yourself up for a massive, unrecoverable failure 2 years down the road?
That's a scary thought.
Think about how you can test that assumption today. We'll catch you next time.
And that's it for today's episode of Whyloric. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if something today made you think, made you curious, or even made you smile, let me know in the comments. Until next time, stay curious. This has been Whyloric. See you in the next episode.